You can hike 200 miles of the Appalachian Trail without ever being truly alone. Not because it's crowded, because the mountains keep things. Old mountains, especially in the Appalachians, are the oldest mountains on Earth. What the people in tonight's stories found in those mountains is not the scenery they planned for. Subscribe if you want more. First story, right now. I want to tell this story in the order I understood it, not the order it happened. Because in the order it happened, each piece was innocent. Each piece had a reasonable explanation, and I accepted every reasonable explanation in sequence, which is how a thing like this works. It relies on your willingness to explain each piece individually, to never lay them side by side and look at the shape they make together. So I'm going to lay them side by side right here for you, in the order they make sense, not the order they arrived. I met him at mile 43. My name is Faye. I was doing a 200-mile section of the AT through Virginia, solo, 16 days, a trip I had planned for a year and trained for specifically. I am an experienced hiker. I have done solo sections before. I am comfortable with my own company. I know my gear. I had told my brother the route, the shelter list, the check-in schedule. I had a satellite communicator. I was not reckless. I want to say all of this because I want you to understand that what happened to me was not the result of carelessness. It was the result of something that is designed to look harmless until it isn't. Mile 43, a section of trail with moderate elevation gain, loose shale on the surface, the kind of surface where a trekking pole tip can catch and skip. Mine did. The pole buckled at the lower section, a manufacturing defect I hadn't noticed until it failed, and I went down on one knee on the shale. Not badly. Scraped, frustrated, one of my poles now rattling and unreliable. I was assessing the damage when a man came down the trail from ahead of me, northbound, same direction. I was moving and stopped. He said, "You okay?" I said, "Yes, just the pole." He crouched and looked at it and said he had a repair sleeve in his kit, a small aluminum tube used for exactly this kind of buckle. And did I want him to fix it? I said yes. He fixed it in about 2 minutes, standing on the trail, friendly and competent, no pressure. His name was Holt. He was probably 50, average build, a full pack, the gear of someone who knew what they were doing. We talked for maybe 5 minutes about the section ahead. He was moving faster than me, he said, and had already done the ridge I was heading for. He gave me a weather note front moving in Thursday. He said I should know. I thanked him. He kept walking. He was out of sight in 10 minutes. That was mile 43. Day 3 of 16. I thought trail community. I thought this is the thing I love about the AT. I put it in my journal that evening as a good moment in a good day. I did not think about Holt again. Day 5. Shelter 6, a standard 3-sided structure on a ridge, space for 6 hikers, a rain tarp that could be lowered across the front. I arrived around 5 in the afternoon, and there was one other person already there, Holt. He was cooking at the table outside the shelter. He looked up, recognized me, said, "Hey, Faye, how's the pole holding up?" I said it was fine. The repair had held. We ate near each other, talked a little about the section. He mentioned he had slowed down the past 2 days, some knee trouble. We slept in the same shelter, 8 feet apart on the same platform. In the morning, he was gone before I woke up. I thought, the trail is long and the shelters are on the same route. Of course, we overlapped again. Day 8, shelter 9. I arrived at 4:30 to find Holt there. He said, taken a rest day at the previous town to resupply and let his knee settle. He had started early to make up miles. We ate together, talked more this time. He asked about my job, my reason for the trip, my training. I answered. He was easy company, knowledgeable about the trail, never pushy. In the morning, he was again gone before I woke. I thought a 0 day explains the timing. 2 overlaps in 16 days is not unusual on a shared route. Day 11, shelter 12, Holt. Arrived an hour after me, said he had been pushing miles, mentioned a family event he needed to be off the trail for by day 16, same day I was finishing. He cooked, we talked, he went to sleep before I did. In the morning, gone before I woke. Day 13, shelter 14, Holt. This time I arrived to find him already there, settled in, cooking. And something shifted. Not a large shift, a small one. I had been looking forward to a night alone at the shelter. The trail had been quiet, I had been in a good solitary rhythm, and seeing him there produced a feeling I noted and filed: mild disappointment, not alarm. Mild disappointment, which I attributed to introversion. I had been solo for 13 days, and an unexpected social obligation was mildly unwelcome. That was all. I filed it, said hello, made dinner. He asked how my right knee was feeling. I have a right knee issue, an old injury that flares on long descents. I manage it with a brace and ibuprofen. I had not mentioned it to Holt. I was almost certain I had not mentioned it to Holt. I thought back through our 4 conversations and could not find a moment where I had brought it up. I said, "It's fine." He said, "The descent into Shelter 12 was tough on mine too. I figured yours might be giving you trouble." Plausible. The descent had been steep. Knee injuries in that terrain are common. Many hikers have knee trouble. I let it go. I filed it. Day 15, 1 day from the end, Shelter 16. I arrived and Holt was not there. I felt something I am embarrassed to name, but will name because I think it is important. Relief. Clear physical relief. A relaxation in my shoulders I had not known was there, and the relief made me aware, for the first time, that something had been tensing those shoulders without my conscious knowledge. Something about his presence, accumulated across 5 shelters, that had been registering below the level of my rationalization. I opened the shelter register, trail register's record, who signs in, the date, the direction of travel, comments. I sometimes read back through them. I read back through Shelter 16's register, idly eating dinner. And then I read back through Shelter 14's register, which I had photographed on my phone along with the others for my trip documentation, and Shelter 12, and Shelter 9, and Shelter 6. Holt had signed every register. I knew his handwriting by now. We had been signing the same registers for 10 days. It was distinctive, neat, small capitals, a specific way of writing the date. I found it in each register, going back to Shelter 6, and going back further, Shelter 4, Shelter 3, Day 2 and Day 1 of my trip. His handwriting in the register, signed in, going northbound, the day before I arrived, each time already there, already moved on by the time I reached each shelter. He had been 1 shelter ahead of me since before I met him, since before I had a broken trekking pole and he crouched on the trail and fixed it with a repair sleeve he had been carrying since the beginning. I called Ranger Addie on my satellite communicator that evening. I gave her his name, described him physically, told her the shelter list, told her he had been 1 shelter ahead of me from the start and present at 5 of my shelter nights. Each appearance engineered: broken pole, knee trouble, 0 day, pushing miles. Each one a plausible reason to be exactly where I was on each specific night. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "I'm going to make some calls." "What shelter are you at tonight?" I told her. She said, "Stay there. I'll have someone at the trailhead when you finish tomorrow." There was a ranger at the trailhead when I finished. He took my statement. He confirmed that a person matching Holt's description, using that name, was registered at the trailhead for the same start date as me, same direction. He confirmed the register entries. He confirmed that no additional contact was made, no threat was made, no crime I could name had been committed. He said it carefully. No crime that I could name. What had been done was a sustained and deliberate project that I had been inside of without knowing, and it had ended, so far as I knew, at mile 200. I filed a full report at the district ranger station when I came off the trail. Ranger Addie said, "This is a very complete record. You kept good documentation." I said, "Only because I happened to read back through the registers before the last shelter. If I had not read back, if I had simply signed the register at Shelter 16 and gone to sleep, I would have finished the trip without ever knowing." She nodded. She said, "Most people don't read back. They sign in, maybe read the most recent page, move on. Reading back through multiple shelters is not a common habit." She paused. "It's a habit I'm going to start recommending." The investigation identified the name used in the registers as a false name, no permit registered under that name for any trailhead in the district. No crime that could be named in the relevant statutes had been committed. I think about the pole repair, The repair sleeve was in his kit from the beginning. He had been one shelter ahead of me since the start. He fixed my pole at mile 43 on day 3 because he had been one shelter ahead, had doubled back to find me, had the sleeve ready. The repair was not kindness, it was an introduction. A way to put his face and his name in my memory on a basis of goodwill, so that when he appeared at Shelter 6 and Shelter 9 and Shelter 12 and Shelter 14, I would file each appearance under known and harmless rather than under pattern. He was excellent at this. I want to say that clearly and without flinching. He was very good at what he did. The warmth of the initial encounter was the tool that made every subsequent encounter seem safe. Check the register early. Read back through the pages. Note the names and directions of every other hiker in your section. Note whether any name appears more frequently than chance explains. Do this at Shelter 2, not Shelter 14. Do it when the pattern is 2 data points, not 5. When you register at a trailhead, ask the ranger station whether any other permits are registered for your same direction and dates. Note those names. The trail is not exclusively permit registered in most sections, but overlapping registrations create a record. A record that, in retrospect, would have shown me that Holt had registered before me and for the same section and the same dates. A record that would have told me something at mile 2 rather than at mile 200. Sign the register fully. Read the registers at each shelter, not just the most recent page. Note names you see more than once. If a name appears at every shelter you pass through in the same direction, that is not coincidence. That is a pattern. And if someone on the trail knows something about your body that you did not tell them the wrong knee, the old injury, the specific way you move on a hard descent, leave that shelter in the morning and do not return to it. Don't explain. Don't be polite about it. Get moving and put miles between you. The pole repair was real. The sleeve was real. The kindness of the gesture was real. That is the part that took me the longest to sit with. That a person can engineer a real moment of genuine feeling helpfulness and use it as the first piece in something much larger and much colder. Check the register. Check it early. Check it often. June and I had been planning this trip for 4 months. She is a better planner than I am. She researched the campsites, pulled the permit, checked the water sources, and put together a gear list that we went through together 3 weeks before we left. This was the 3rd backpacking trip we had done together, and the most ambitious. 3 nights in a remote section of Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia, a loop that took in a ridge traverse and ended at a backcountry campsite in a natural bowl that the trip reports described as one of the most beautiful spots in that part of the mountains. June had been looking at the photographs of that campsite for months. She had it as her laptop wallpaper. That context matters, because I want you to understand how much we wanted to be in that campsite, how much goodwill we arrived with, and how quickly that goodwill became something else entirely. We arrived at the bowl campsite on the 2nd afternoon of the trip, around 4 o'clock. The approach was a descending trail through dense second growth that opened abruptly onto the flat of the bowl, a clearing of maybe an acre, ringed on all sides by the steep forested walls of the bowl, with a small creek running along the south edge and the fire ring at the center. Beautiful, exactly as advertised. The fire ring was occupied, not with flames, with coals, bright orange coals, actively glowing, the specific look of a fire that has been burning for hours and is now at its hottest point before it begins to cool. A cook pot was on the grate, a lightweight titanium pot, a backpacker's pot, with something still in it that was still steaming slightly. Beside the fire, a food bag half open, a stuff sack with what looked like a half-packed sleeping bag spilling out, and a tent not pitched but not packed either, the poles still threaded, the body of the tent folded loosely on top of the footprint. We stopped at the edge of the clearing. June looked at the fire. She said, "They just left." I said, "Very recently." She said, "Like minutes ago." I looked around the clearing, one way in the trail we had descended. The bowl walls on every other side, steep, densely forested, not trail. The clearing was a room, and we had just come through the only door. Whoever had left this camp in the last few minutes was either on the trail ahead of us, which would mean they had passed us going out, which we would have seen, or they were in the forest on the bowl walls. inside the ball with us. I said this to June quietly. She looked at the walls. She said they heard us coming and left in a hurry. That was the most reasonable explanation. A camper who heard us coming down the trail and, for whatever reason, didn't want to be there when we arrived. Campers do odd things. Some people are aggressively solitary. It was a permitted site with enough space for 2 camps. There was no clear reason to leave. But people do odd things, and the leaving in a hurry interpretation was available, and June offered it, and I took it. We set up our tent on the opposite side of the clearing from the abandoned camp. We used the same fire ring. There was only one, and we ate dinner, and June made tea, and we watched the abandoned camp across the clearing. The fire died down gradually, which it would have done with or without us. The half-packed tent and the food bag stayed exactly as they were. Nobody came back for them. At around 8 o'clock, June said, not dramatically, just noting it, they're still here, aren't they? It was not a question. I said, probably. She said, in the trees on the wall. I said, that's my read. She said, okay, and she put another piece of wood on the fire, and we sat with the fire between us and the tree line. I want to tell you about the quality of the watching, because I have tried to articulate it to people since, and it is hard to convey. It is not a sound. It is not a sight. It is a quality of being in a space where the space is not empty in the way you expect it to be empty, a weight or a texture to the air on one side that is different from the other side. June felt it on the west wall. I felt it on the north, where the bowl wall was steepest and the trees were thickest. Whether we were feeling the same person or 2 different presences, I do not know. We did not discuss the west and north separately until later. We heard it at around 10. A single sound from the north wall, not loud, not close. The specific sound of a branch under weight. Not a falling branch. A branch under the weight of something that shifted. A sound with intention behind it, controlled, not accidental. The sound of someone who is moving carefully and almost succeeding at being silent. June was in the sleeping bag already, reading. She looked up. We looked at each other. The fire was good, a proper fire. 4-foot flame. Substantial. I put another piece of wood on it. I did not call out. I did not shine the headlamp toward the sound. I had thought about this in the previous 2 hours. Calling out identifies your exact position to something that may not know your exact position, gives you no useful information in return, and may escalate a situation that is currently static. Static was better than escalated. I kept the fire bright, and I stayed in the light of it, and I said nothing. The branch sound did not repeat. The west wall stayed quiet for the rest of the night. I slept in 2-hour stretches, which is the kind of sleep you get when part of your brain is staying on duty. June slept more than I did, which is her gift. In the morning, she said she had heard something at around 2 in the morning from the south side, near the creek, but it was quiet and brief, and she had gone back to sleep. South side, near the creek, the bowl had 3 separate presences through the night by our separate accountings, 1 each on the north, west, and south walls at different points. We broke camp at first light, not in a panic, efficiently, the kind of packing that takes 20 minutes when it normally takes 40 because every motion is purposeful and nothing is wasted. We left the bowl by 7 in the morning, moving back up the descent trail. We did not look back at the abandoned camp across the clearing. We did not touch anything that had been left there. We just went. We told the story to the ranger at the permit checkout station. He was a young ranger, had been at that station for 2 seasons, and he listened carefully. When I described the bowl, the single entrance, the natural containment, he nodded. He knew the site. He said, "We get reports from that bowl a couple of times per season, usually just unauthorized campers who scatter when permitted hikers arrive." June asked, "Usually just unauthorized campers, or sometimes something else?" The ranger looked at her. He said, "Usually," he said it with the specific weight of a word, "doing more work than it appears to be doing." June said, "Okay," and we signed out and went to the car. In the car, June said, 3 separate positions. He said, "Usually." I said, "He said, usually." She looked at the trailhead for a moment. 1 person could move position over the course of a night, circle around. I said, "Yes." She said, "But 3 positions held simultaneously, north wall, west wall, south wall at 2 in the morning. That is 3 people or 1 person who moves very quietly and very fast between covered positions in the dark. We sat with the math of that for a minute. Then June said, "What did they want?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "We left in the morning." I said, "Yes." She said, "So the leaving was enough. We have talked about this many times since. Whether the leaving in the morning was enough because it was always going to be enough, because whatever was in that bowl wanted only to contain us through the night and release us in the morning, or whether the leaving was enough because the fire prevented it from becoming more. The brightness, the fact that we kept it large and fed through the night, which gave us light and gave us a clear view of the entire clearing and gave anything in the trees a clear view of us, also clearly awake, clearly present, clearly not alone in the way that makes a target. Keep the fire bright." I want to say this specifically in the context of a contained site. A fire in a bowl is visible in the bowl but not outside it. The walls contain the light, which means whatever was in the walls could see us clearly in our light, and we could not see them in their dark. This is not an argument against a fire. This is an argument for making it as large and sustained as possible, because a fire that large communicates, we are awake, we have been awake, we will be awake at 2 in the morning just as we are awake now. A fire is a sustained presence. Know the geometry before you camp. A bowl is beautiful and a bowl has 1 exit, and you should know this about the place you are sleeping in. Know whether you are in a room. Know where the door is. Know the time to the door in the dark. June had checked before dinner. She looked at the map and said, "We can be off this trail in 40 minutes in the dark if we need to be." She said it casually, as part of thinking through the camp logistics. That knowledge is the specific kind that allows you to sleep in 2-hour stretches instead of not sleeping at all. There is a difference between being contained and being trapped, and the difference is whether there is a door and whether you know how long the door takes. We were contained, we were not trapped. June made sure of that before the dark came. Make sure before the dark comes. I want to start with what I found, because the finding is the thing that unlocks everything that came before it, and the story does not make sense in any other order. Everything before the finding is just a pleasant solo hiking trip. It is only after the finding that everything before it becomes something else. Day 9, Shelter 11 on my permit route through the Shenandoah section, the section I had chosen specifically for its combination of ridge views and solitude. I was a solo hiker, 9 days in, 4 more to go. I had been averaging good miles. The weather had cooperated. I was in the specific, excellent state of a long solo trip where the body has settled into its rhythm and the mind has gone quiet, and the only thing that matters is the trail ahead and the camp at the end of it. A good trip, an uncomplicated trip, until Shelter 11. My name is Beckett. I am 38 years old. I have been hiking for 20 years and solo tripping for 12 of those, and I have never in 12 years had a trip go the way this one went after day 9. I reached Shelter 11 around 3 in the afternoon early by my pace. The shelter was empty. I signed the register. I went to the water source, filtered 2 liters, came back. I was about to start making dinner when I noticed it was sitting on the register shelf, not in the register, next to it, propped against the wall with a small rock holding it in place. A photograph. A printed photograph, 4x6, glossy, the kind you print at a drugstore, of a hiker on a trail, from behind, full pack, trekking poles, moving. The trail in the photograph was clearly AT. The blazes were visible on a tree in the frame. The hiker in the photograph, clearly me. My pack, which has a distinctive orange collar on the lid pocket. My stride, which I recognized when I looked at it properly because, your own body in motion after enough years. My hat, I held the photograph for probably 30 seconds before I set it down. I looked around the empty shelter. I looked at the tree line outside. Nothing. I looked at the photograph again. The angle of it suggested the photographer had been elevated above and behind me, shooting downward and forward. The trail in the background was visible for maybe a quarter mile. The shot was not taken with a phone. The depth of field and the distance suggested a proper camera with a substantial lens. The hiker I appeared small in the frame, unaware, shot from far enough that no sound would have carried and no peripheral vision would have registered. I called my friend Silas on the satellite communicator. I described the photograph. He said, "Someone you know on the trail?" I said, "No one I've met, no one I've talked to. I haven't had a significant conversation with another hiker in 9 days." He said, "Could it be a trail photographer? Someone who photographs sections and leaves prints at shelters?" I said, "With my specific pack, my specific stride, me specifically left at the specific shelter I was going to arrive at today." He said, "Call the ranger station." I called Ranger Vera at the district station. She asked me to describe the photograph in detail, the angle, the apparent distance, the identifiable features of the subject. She asked whether the photograph appeared to have been placed for me specifically or could have been left for any hiker. I said my pack's orange collar is distinctive and is visible in the photograph. The photograph appears to have been placed for me. She said, "Stay at the shelter. I'll be there in the morning." That night was the longest of the trip. I kept the shelter light on. I had a lantern. I used it at full brightness all night. I did not sleep significantly. I sat against the back wall of the shelter, which gave me a view of the entire open front and both sides. And I thought about what was in the trees outside, and I thought about the photograph, and I thought about the angle of it above and behind. Significant elevation, significant distance, a real lens. And I thought, someone has been in the mountains above this trail, above me specifically, watching me through a telephoto lens for long enough to take a clear photograph and print it and place it where I would find it. Ranger Vera arrived at 7 in the morning. She was calm and specific in the way of someone for whom this is work, not the first unusual thing. She took the photograph, bagged it. She asked about my route, the exact trail, the exact shelters, the days. She asked whether I had found anything unusual at any previous shelter. I said no. She said, "Let me show you something." She had with her a file folder. In the file folder, in evidence sleeves, were 3 more photographs. She laid them on the shelter bench. Each of them was me, on the trail. All from behind or from distance, all taken with the same substantial lens, all showing me clearly identifiable by pack and clothing and movement. She pointed to the identifying information written in pencil on the back of each one, a shelter number and a date. Shelter 4, day 3 of my trip. Shelter 7, day 6. Shelter 9, day 8. 4 photographs, 4 shelters, spanning 9 days. Each left at a shelter after my departure before the next hiker arrived to find them and turn them in to the ranger station. Ranger Vera said, "Someone has been photographing you since approximately day 3 of your permit and leaving the photographs at shelters behind you." She said it carefully, looking at my face. I said, "Why behind me?" She said, "We think the Shelter 11 photograph was left ahead of you intentionally as a message. The others were left behind. Possible the person was documenting without wanting you to know. The Shelter 11 photograph is a change in behavior." A change in behavior. The thing that had been silent for 8 days had chosen, on day 9, to announce itself, to leave the photograph where I would find it, to tell me that it had been there all along. I asked Vera, did the cameras at any of the shelter boards capture anyone leaving the photographs? She said the shelters on my section did not have cameras. She said the photographs themselves were the primary evidence. The lab would process them for fingerprints, and the paper and ink type might be traceable to a specific printer. She said, "These are not the first photographs like this we have received from this section. Not the first." I asked how many times. She said 4 other hikers in the past 2 seasons, all solo, all with photographs left at shelters after their departure. None of them encountered the photographer. None of them were harmed. She paused. The Shelter 11 photograph is the first instance where a photograph was left ahead of the subject rather than behind. That is new. I finished the trip with ranger coordination check-ins twice daily, a changed shelter schedule, a companion ranger walking the final 2 days with me. I found no more photographs. I encountered no one who matched any description Vera could give me, because Vera had no description to give 4 previous cases, and no image of the photographer, no witness, no clear print from any photograph. A person who had been in the mountains above the trail for 2 seasons, at minimum, watching solo hikers through a telephoto lens, printing the photographs, leaving them at shelters, and had never been close enough to be described. Vera called me 3 weeks after I finished. The fingerprint partial from the Shelter 11 photograph matched no existing record. The paper was untraceable. The investigation remained open. She said, I want to tell you something that is in the case file. She said that the 5 solo hikers in the photographs, the 4 before me plus me, had one additional thing in common beyond being photographed. She said all 5 were on solo permits, registered through the same online permit system. The permit system that shows on a public-facing page the permit holder's name in the trail section and the start date, a public-facing permit registration, my name, my trail section, my start date. All of it visible to anyone who checked the permit system for that district during my registration window. Someone had taken that information, identified my likely pace and shelter schedule, positioned themselves above the trail with a long lens before I arrived on day 3, and had been there above me, invisible every time I passed a ridge, with sufficient elevation and cover. I hike with my head up now. Not in fear, I still solo hike. I still go into the mountains, but I hike with my head up and I look at the ridge lines above the trail. I look at the places where someone with a real camera and a real lens would stand to shoot down into a trail at a moving hiker. I look at those places and I do not see anyone in them. I've not seen anyone, but the photographs exist. They are in a ranger station file. They are evidence of someone who was in those places when I could not see them, and who had been in those places for 2 seasons before I arrived, and who accessed public permit information to know I was coming. Check whether your permit system has a public-facing registration page. If it does, understand that your name, your section, and your dates are visible to anyone who checks. That is not a reason to not register. Registration is safety and it is required. It is a reason to know what information is public and to understand what that information enables. Look up at the ridge lines. Know that the trail is one dimension of the mountain and the mountain has others. Know that the elevation above the trail has views, and those views are not only yours. The ridge lines are apparently empty. The mountains are apparently as indifferent to your movement through them as mountains are supposed to be. Apparently is the word I live with now. Look up, see what is looking back.